Hello and welcome everyone. IOActive is excited to present a live webinar today with Daniel Miessler, our Director of Advisory Services here at IOActive. Our webinar today is from 10 to 11 a.m. During the talk, please enter your questions into the questions box you'll see on your display. After the talk, we'll have 15 minutes for answering your questions. To give you a little information on Daniel, Security Leader Daniel Miessler, Director of Advisory Services at IOActive, has been an author and security consultant for nearly 20 years. He has a background in security and pen testing with a focus on security of networks, web applications, mobile security, and IoT systems across multiple verticals. Over the course of his career, he has helped address threats and improve security for numerous leading global companies and entities. Daniel's interests are focused around the intersection of security, technology, and the humanities, with special focus on building cross-discipline models of how the world works and using them to improve outcomes. He has also recently authored The Real Internet of Things, which focuses on the future of IoT technology and security. Today, Daniel will share observations and analysis from the InfoSec industry in a talk titled Offensive Security, Secrets from the Dark Side. Daniel, take it away.
All right, thanks a lot. And welcome to the webinar today. My name is Daniel. The four main concepts I want to talk about are kind of an interesting potential future for security testing, how to avoid using the wrong type of security assessment, which we see a lot of companies do, building defense based on offense, and moving from prevention to resilience. So the first piece is kind of a story around a change that we see coming to InfoSec. And it could be a potentially frightening concept for some to hear, but I think a lot of people also see this coming as well, which is we believe security and IT are heading towards vendor-based systems in the near future, and we think it's already happening. So basically a lot of companies would prefer not to have employees and would rather use vendors to accomplish a lot of their IT and IT security goals. And that might not be a surprise to a lot of people, but could be alarming to some as well. So the model here is basically what remains inside of the IT department is basically a group of super seasoned IT professionals who are very, very strong with business. And they're also extremely strong with IT as well. So basically when the business wants to do something, they give the requirements to their business IT professionals, which a lot of companies call bits. And they basically say, go turn this business requirement that I have into reality. So if that requirement is a security assessment, then they're basically going to try and pick the best possible security assessment based on data provided by actually insurance companies. Excuse me. So one thing that we kind of see happening is insurance companies becoming experts on what works and what doesn't work inside of security. And up until now, it's been kind of a magical kind of thing where basically you have hacker types or security types go to management and say, if you don't do this and you don't do that, you're going to get hacked. And that fear has caused people to take action in some cases, and in some cases not. But insurance has a different play. The insurance industry in cyber is going up fairly rapidly year over year. And the thing about insurance companies is they don't like paying premiums when they don't know the risk involved and how much they're going to lose. So just like what they did with safety and vehicles and homes and stuff like that, we see that same sort of thing happening around cyber as well. So basically what you'll have is these business IT professionals inside of companies will have more knowledge of what kind of assessment works for what type of project that they have, and they'll pick the one that's the most cost effective and accomplishes the goal the best. So that brings us to different security assessment types and how the definitions are kind of just massacred by the industry in general. I don't really blame sales and marketing. Well, let me take that back. I do. I blame sales and marketing, basically. And also the technical people, we should also do a better job of keeping them in check. So some real quick definitions which I think work really well for keeping people kind of synchronized. A vulnerability assessment is basically when you ask to find everything wrong and prioritize it for remediation. You know, full stop. Find as many things as possible and rank them so you know what to work on first. A penetration test, this one gets messed up quite a bit, where you basically believe that you're pretty secure and you want to see if an attacker can do something to you. So you're defining goals and giving them to the pen tester and saying, can you do X, Y, or Z, A, B, or C? Even though I think I'm secure. You shouldn't be able to do them, but I want to see if you can. Red team is basically a campaign that tests your organization continuously to see how resistant it is to your most likely attackers, with the key being that it's continuous. And with bounty, you're basically using the greater community to augment different types of security testing. So there's been some recent negative marketing around from some of the bug bounty companies, which I find strange because they're kind of, I feel like they're attacking kind of an old model. So our company, IOActive, we kind of changed our message years ago away from being a pen test company. We consider ourselves a security services company. So do we do pen testing? Of course. But we also do code review, you know, white box, gray box, whatever, all the different types of assessment. And part of that, we recommend bounty. When it's the right tool for the job, we recommend bounty. We actually have a whole offering around sort of determining what the best type of public disclosure mechanism is. Do you want to do it internal? Do you want to use a vendor? What vendor should you use? So we're a fan of this stuff. I'm a fan of this stuff personally as well. One of my best friends in the world works at one of the best bounty companies out there. I've done a number of webinars with them, and I love what bounty's doing basically for the industry. But unfortunately, some of the marketing is basically saying, you know, we do this one thing, and if you do anything else, it's bad. And I also don't, I think that's kind of like attacking the pen test side, which a lot of the pen testers are actually the same people that we want to be working on bounties as well. It's kind of testers are testers and testing is testing. And ultimately the lines between these things are kind of artificial. So just a crazy idea here. This is not a real thing, just to keep in mind, but a potential future kind of looks like this, where everyone who's a tester, regardless of where you work, right? You're running an app called Hack, right? It's kind of like Uber for testers, right? You get a ding on this app and you got an incoming testing job. Maybe it comes from a consultancy. Maybe it comes from a bug bounty. Maybe it comes from the customer directly, but it's all the same stuff, right? It's a tester's world out there. The tester and the customer are the ones that matter inside this ecosystem. And really neither testers or customers are going to care too much how the work gets done as long as it's, you know, high quality and safe. So this is kind of the way I would sort of categorize this kind of a moot point or a false debate. Basically, the bounty model can often find vulnerabilities that traditional testing cannot find. That's true. And there are also situations where you simply can't use the bounty model because of business sensitivity. And third, if you're not accepting this truth and kind of telling the truth about it, then you've probably never been a tester. You're probably not going to be in the industry for too long, and you just might have marketing in your title. So I think that's the best way to summarize this, right? It's not one or the other. It's all sides being true. And that brings us to kind of, that was a minor point. This is kind of the biggest point and the biggest misconception out there about testing in general, which is the confusion around vulnerability assessment versus pen test. So everyone's basically all about the pen test. Sales and marketing, customers, vendors, everyone's kind of talking about the penetration test. And they're usually misusing the terms in our opinion. The problem is that pen testing is for testing a system that you believe is already secure, right? Basically, you're already done securing this thing as much as possible. You think it's locked down, and you want to validate that against specific goals. So you tell them, I want you to steal the car, I want you to open the valve, I want you to exfiltrate the database, I want you to make the unauthorized transfer or whatever. How many pen tests have you actually seen where someone was requesting a pen test where that was actually true, where they actually believed it was secure and they just wanted to validate that? I don't know, having worked in many, many companies over the years, I would say that number is very low, probably less than 5%. I have no idea, but I think it's very low. So if you look at the chart here, the red bar, VA, which is about 3/4 of the way up all the way to the bottom, that's the area where you haven't done tons of testing and you haven't done tons of remediation. And that's usually where most projects are. If you look at the green, most projects, they might span different levels of business sensitivity, but so many projects who come to vendors have not already been tested multiple times and remediated, and they don't need a pen test. And of course, bounty here can span all of them, right? It's not actually a testing type. It's an approach or a model to doing lots of different testing types. So these all kind of work together. So if you're a company that's basically decided or has to decide what type of test you have to do, here's a really good approach to figuring this out. Figure out which question you're asking. Are you saying, I know I messed up and I need a list of my issues prioritized by risk? If so, that's a vulnerability assessment. And if you're saying, I think I'm secure and can you do any of these bad things to us, then that's a pen test. So in the vast majority of cases that we see, most people really need to just do the cycle of vulnerability assessment, remediation, and repeating. And obviously there are many exceptions. There are many extremely mature shops who need more advanced types of testing. But the key point here is don't do or ask for a pen test when you actually need a vulnerability assessment. So the next thing I want to talk about is defending against the wrong thing. So one problem I think we have in the industry is where we take an audit approach to risk assessment. We basically want to measure everything, and then we kind of act as if all those measurements are equal, right? So a lot of companies are using audit basically as their compass for what they should be working on, right? And it completely overwhelms their team because they have too much data coming in, right? I've seen a lot of places, let's say they're testing web apps, and they've got like 2,500 web apps in their portfolio. They have 3 security people. When you ask them what their testing methodology looks like, it's 113 pages long, right? And that's just not an effective way to approach the problem. So when we started looking at the problem here at IOActive, we basically said, what are other industries doing? And we took a look at the medical industry as an example. So the audit approach basically overwhelms you with data that's not useful. It would be kind of like, going to a doctor. They do all these tests. They hand you your lab results on like this massive, USB drive, and they say, here are the 12,433 ways that you are not an Olympic athlete, And if you have any questions, here's a link to Wikipedia, right? So you end up with these giant reports. You end up with all these massive gaps against, all these best practices and, ideal situations and audit guidelines. But ultimately, the work is being outsourced back to you. So what a good doctor would do is parse all that information themselves and then tell you what you should do to get better, right? So it's do this, do this, do this, and because we saw this in your environment, you should also do this as well. And, come back and we'll monitor your progress and we'll readjust accordingly. And that's not outsourcing the work to you, that's taking on the work themselves as an expert and then giving you a curated list of what you need to do. So what we decided to do is basically look at it from the perspective of an attacker, right? What are the things that are actually getting companies breached? Not the best practices, not compliance. What are actually getting companies hacked? What do the breach reports say? What does our pen testing data tell us? We have so much knowledge of how people are getting breached, but we didn't see people using that knowledge to determine the best next step for fixing it. So we basically set out to build a risk assessment model based on attacker perspective instead of compliance, right? A lot of people are treating auditors and compliance people as their main threat actor, like you're defending against the audit that's coming up instead of the attacker. So we took a different approach. So what we essentially do is we take a look at the things that we know work inside of tests. When we're on site, when we're testing an org, we're testing from the outside, we're able to look at what we know is effective in compromising companies, and we assess a company based on that. And what we do is we assign ratings inside of the various areas of the org that have those components of an attacker methodology. So rather than looking at 10,000 different things, we're looking at a relatively few that we know are effective in compromising systems. So the best part of the system is that it produces a numbered, ordered recommendation list based on risk. And they're based on reducing the most risk possible. And basically, you do 1 before you do 3, you do 4 before you do 5, and you definitely don't work on item number 37, which is kind of the problem that we currently have inside of a lot of companies, is that there are tons of projects going on at any given time, but are those projects the 37th most important thing to be working on, the 10th most important? Is it the second most important? The problem is whenever some vuln with a name comes out, right, whatever it is, shiny worm or spiffy worm or whatever it is, whenever that comes out, that tends to take over the entire security department for days or weeks. And it just kind of knocks off the priority list, and it's hard to get back to what actually matters. So what's pretty fascinating about it is we've run it on lots of different organizations, and it creates completely different output from what the security leader thought was going on. So we have a lot of situations where we sit down with someone and they're like, okay, yeah, we heard you did an assessment. Let's take a look at it. I already know we're in good shape because, we just put in these trillion-dollar systems, and we feel pretty confident. I just, presented to my management on how much, better we're doing, and I feel pretty good. So what do you have, right? And we say, well, okay, well, we hit an overall risk score of an F for the organization from an attacker perspective. And they say, well, that's definitely not true because, like I said, I just presented to our management and we're doing quite well. And they say, show me what you looked at, right? So we go through and we say, all right, we looked at, for example, your egress. You're not controlling any traffic outbound. This is what attackers actually do. You're not controlling DNS. it's trivial to bypass any system to send data out, to maintain command and control, to do whatever. They go through the list and they're like, okay, yeah, that's valid. Yeah, you got me on that one. What about the next one? And we proceed to go through how we looked at the organization from this completely different perspective. And for each one, they say, okay, yeah, that one's valid. That one's true as well. Okay, that one's true as well. We get to the end, you see the really bad score, and they say, wow, this is a very common response we're hearing is, I don't like it, but I do agree with it. And that vision, that view into their org is fundamentally changed for them at that moment from what they thought it was. So what also surprised me in going through the process was how some really good lists. So the CIS top 20 controls is, in my opinion, it's a fantastic document. It's a fantastic list of recommendations. But what we found is that our methodology was differing quite a bit in the order in which we would recommend things be done for customers. And we're thinking, why is that? And I guess to some degree it's obvious. It's because CIS is one document, it's static, and it's based on a composite of many companies and lots of time. But it's really important to notice that there is a difference between looking at an org from an attacker perspective and doing it in a custom way from the recommendations that you would produce from a CIS system. So a couple of examples. So number 2 item is software inventory, which I think would probably be much lower, and we would say would be much lower from a perspective that we've seen. And then number 3 is secure configuration, and this is before limiting admin, before controlling email and web security, and incident response. And this is quite interesting. Incident response is way down at 19. So we think all the controls are great, but they don't necessarily represent how much risk could be fixed to defend against the actual people who are attacking you. So we thought that was interesting. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is people being completely obsessed with prevention. So when orgs are thinking about prevention completely, and RSA has a big role to play in this because they push prevention as basically magic, right? Every product that you see as you walk up and down the aisles, they can stop everything, right? And if you're familiar with the peak oil concept, right, there comes a point when there's only so much oil and it can only go down from there, and it can no longer go up. It can stay the same or go down. And it's arguable that prevention is kind of on the same slope. But you wouldn't hear that from RSA because they're going to claim that machine learning can save you and this next antivirus can save you or whatever. So risk is, of course, both probability and impact, right? And we've kind of been stuck on the probability side for like 20 years or more. And it's time to start looking at the other side, right? Because it's multiplication, right? You lower either one and you lower your risk overall. And we've basically put billions of dollars into the left side, and now we're getting diminishing returns where we could spend billions of dollars more and not get much response on that. But if we spend maybe a little bit more effort on the right side, we can move the bar. So basically, the best possible risk improvement can't come from lowering the chances of attack really anymore. They're going to come from being better prepared when we do get attacked. So we're trying to get basically to the upper right, And obviously we can't get to 1 × 1 = 1. What we need to do is get into the green box, which is acceptable business risk. But we are stuck at the red dot on the left, right? So we're trying to get from 6 to 5, and we're trying to get from 5 to 4, but we're kind of stuck, right? We've spent all the billions of dollars, and we can't really lower that much more unless we fundamentally change a few things, which is kind of unlikely to happen. So we're kind of stuck there. But what we need to do to get into the green is we need to move to the right, right? We need to improve resilience, which means reducing the amount of damage that we take if something bad does happen. So how do you do that, right? Reducing impact really starts with making a list of the worst possible things that could happen to the company, to the business, and then looking at how you would prevent, detect, and most importantly, respond to them. So we call it threat scenario analysis, but it really doesn't need a fancy name. Basically, think about the various groups within the org that need to respond if your customer data were found on pastebin, right? Or if someone held your data at ransom, or whatever your worst case scenarios are, you know, SQL injection, your customer database is lost, whatever it is. It'd probably be a large number of groups, right? 4 groups at least, maybe. You're going to have some sort of coordinated response. And this is especially the case if you have like a big public-facing element to your company where, you know, you need your PR group, your forensic team, your InfoSec team, your legal team. They all need to be coordinated and ready. But too many times, that whole conversation actually starts a couple hours after the incident is detected. So while it's difficult, but not impossible to reduce the chances that something bad will happen, it's much more effective right now because so much little effort has been put on it to actually just reduce the friction and improve the response and the detection and knowing what to do when it actually does happen. So basically, resilience, we think, is going to become like a new type of, the new prevention, basically, a better version of prevention. All right, so what I want to leave you with is this. Basically, companies are increasingly moving towards vendor model for IT services, including testing. If you're a tester, you want to start thinking about your skill set and its marketability in a vendor market. If you're a company, you want to start thinking about how to view testing as a blended offering. The future of security assessment is blended across vulnerability assessment, penetration test, consultancy, bounty, and lots of other different types of testing. And you want to use what fits the project. You want to only ask for a penetration test if you think you're secure, and you actually just want to test that assertion, right? For everything else, you want to be thinking about vulnerability assessment, remediation, and repeating that process. You don't want to let anyone hijack your security program into defending against best practices, auditors, and compliance. So, you know, basically, and I've kind of been in this situation before, and I have lots of friends and colleagues who are in this situation where you show up with your agenda, you show up with your plan on how to secure your org. Then the phone starts ringing, you get into a few meetings, and after 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, you just don't remember what your priorities were. You're not sure if you're even defending against the attackers anymore. And you're basically responding to compliance, you're responding to security questionnaires, you're responding to auditors. And you've kind of lost touch in a lot of cases with what attackers are actually planning to do to you and what you would do to stop them, right? So action items there are remember to go back, not completely discard, but kind of have a separate session that says, what are the most common ways that your company can be attacked, and refocus your projects and your priorities based on that. And if you're finding, for another action item here, if you're finding that you don't have time to actually do security because you're too busy with those audit tasks, see if you could break that audit task out and basically purify the security program into security and attacker-focused defense. And finally, the best way to reduce risk is likely to be ready for the most likely and damaging scenarios. So building that list is absolutely essential, right, for the first action item. Create a list of scenarios that you know would really damage your business, your organization, your customers. Put them on the list. Create a 1 through 10, a 1 through 20, whatever. Put it on the board. And then systematically go through and say, how would I prevent against this? How would I detect it? And most importantly, how would I respond to this if it did happen? So hopefully this has given you a few things to think about. If you're interested in talking with someone here in advisory services about any of this stuff we chatted about, you can reach out below. And if you just want to talk about the concepts sort of offline or out of band, and just have some ideas or just want to ping me, I've got my IOActive email address there as well, and you could also ping me on Twitter. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have if you want to type them into the box.
Thank you, Daniel. Everybody who's left here, we'd love it if you would type your questions into the box as Daniel suggested, and he can scroll down and answer your questions as they come up. Here's a question, Daniel. It says, is resilience typically included in the current scope of vulnerability assessments, pen tests, and bounty programs today? To what extent? Can you answer that for us?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I don't see the question here, so I'm curious who asked it. It's no, it's not. I would say that across security in general, resilience is very much not being considered. You have some exceptions with like Carnegie Mellon and a number of people putting out frameworks, especially around critical systems, who are just now starting to talk about how important resilience is. But it's really not reached the enterprise yet to a large degree, and definitely not when looking at technical testing. In most companies and most vendors, they're very much focused on the types of assessments we talked about. They're focused on finding the most vulnerabilities that you can find, ranking them for remediation, and then validating a secure system if you are actually at that maturity level and you need to do a pen test. So it's really kind of the same for vulnerability assessment, pen test, bounty, code review, really any kind of security assessment. It's all about the vulnerabilities, and very little focus is being placed on the follow-up consulting that says, okay, how can I make you more secure, not by stopping these from happening, but from getting you ready if they did happen.
Okay, great. And it looks like we have another question here for you. It says, should we use the word probability when addressing risk? Wouldn't likelihood be a better term?
Yeah, so I'm using those fairly interchangeably, and a lot of the industry does as well. Likelihood and they're really the same. And one could argue, I have an idea who that question might have come from. But yeah, there's some debate to be had there, and I think definitions are definitely important, as we talked about earlier. But I think either one gets you there, It's the chance of something bad happening versus how bad it would be if it did happen. But it's a good point.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then we have another question here. It reads, if you're aligning the business methodology with the medical world, do you also let all employees say something like the Hippocratic Oath to act ethically at all times or not? If not, why not?
Wow, these are fantastic questions. I would say that there's an implied Hippocratic Oath in security. I think there's an implication there when a security vendor goes to do work for a customer. They're not taking some sort of oath. They're not making it official the way that a doctor does when they graduate and become a physician. But if you work in defense, if you work on a blue team, if you are a pen tester, if you are a researcher, if you are a tester of any kind or an InfoSec professional of any kind in a consulting role, I think there's an implied ethical agreement with the customer that yes, you are going to do the right thing for them. You're going to recommend whatever's best for them. You're not going to abdicate your own, personal interests or your own customer interests or your own vendor interests or whatever company you work for. So I think that's very much along the same lines. And it's really to defend against the same types of things that you would be defending against in the medical industry. Like, let's say the doctor has some relationship with some pharmaceutical company, which that's never happened, of course, but let's say they did, and they suddenly were recommending one particular drug because they had a financial relationship. That's the type of thing you try to avoid with such an ethical agreement, and I think it absolutely needs to exist and does exist in a less formal way in InfoSec as well.
Okay, great. Next question. Hi, Daniel. Is there a way we could get a copy of the presentation today? Thanks a lot for the good information.
Yes, I don't know what that mechanism is, but we will make it available probably on the Twitters and maybe email. I have no idea, but we'll definitely make the slides available.
I can add to that, actually, everyone. We will have this available for everyone. We will have it on our website, and we will have it on our social media channels as well. Next question. You mentioned insurance. Please elaborate on how insurers approach VA/PT results and apply actuarial models for risk assessment.
Yep, that's a fantastic question. The truth, as I'm sure the questioner already knows, is that there are no actuarial models yet for InfoSec, and they will be probably significantly more difficult to create than car crashes and that sort of stuff, because there's just more variables, right? And this is stuff we already know. And the point is not that, oh, you can expect to have these amazing actuarial tables next year or the year after, and it's almost here. What's the point to take is that they're already trying. They're already working on it. They're already selling policies, and they already want to sell policies more effectively. So they are gathering data. It will take time, but you can rest assured that the insurance industry as a whole, who's going to be spending billions of dollars on these policies over the next, in the future going forward, they're going to find ways to make smarter decisions about how much to charge people for their policies. And whether that's, there's lots of different ways of doing that, whether that's through assessment, whether that's through having boxes, listening at the customer site, whether that's through, external, internal assessment, lots of different continuous assessment models. They're going to find ways to collect the data required to make smart decisions about the money they're spending. And if you don't expect that, then you don't know insurance companies very well, because they they definitely want to do that. They definitely want to make sure they're not spending too much in payouts, and that's the whole game for them.
Okay. How are we doing for questions, Daniel? Are there any other ones that you would like to answer?
No, I'm fine. I think those were fantastic questions.
Okay, everyone. That's it for our webinar today. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at future IOActive webinars. If you have any questions, please contact sales@ioactive.com or visit our website at ioactive.com. You can also use the email alias that Daniel provided in his presentation, which is info@ioactive.com. We hope you have a great day, and thank you again for joining us.